What happens when America walks into the room expecting to set the terms, and China starts setting them instead?
For decades, Washington negotiated from strength. The dollar, the military, sanctions. That was the American power. Washington set the terms. Other countries adjusted. But in Beijing, Trump may have faced a very different reality. She had leverage. She had demands. And she may have been trying to write the new rules. Sure, America is still an extraordinarily powerful country. It is about something more subtle, the difference between power and leverage. Power is what America has in the big picture, the military, the dollar, technology, alliances, and the largest consumer market in the world. That has not disappeared. But leverage is different. For decades, America usually walked into these meetings with both power and leverage. The message was simple. America set the terms. Other countries adjusted. But that is not the world Trump walked into in Beijing. Reuters reported before the May 14th summit that Trump was heading to China in need of wins. That phrase matters. A president of the United States traveling to Beijing in need of wins. The Iran war was consuming political capital. Oil prices were elevated. Tariff pressure had created costs on both sides of the Pacific. And the relationship with China had become too important to manage through threats alone. This is where the shift begins. Reuters reported that Trump and Xi were considering tariff cuts on approximately $30 billion of imports, a partial unwinding of years of escalation. Reuters also reported something even more revealing. Chinese exporters had become numb to American threats. That is a signal, because when threats stop moving the other side, the threat is no longer leverage. And once that happens, the negotiating room changes. The meeting lasted approximately 2 hours, according to AP, and look at what was on the table: trade, artificial intelligence, Iran, Taiwan, nuclear arms, agriculture, rare earths, and energy. That is not a normal agenda. That is almost every major pressure point between the world's two largest economies, compressed into a single afternoon. And that tells us something. This was not America walking in with overwhelming leverage. This was two powers sitting across from each other because both needed something. America usually asks what it can force China to do. But this summit raised a much more uncomfortable question. What does America now need China to do? And that is not the position Washington is used to being in. I want to stop on two words that most coverage of this summit passed over quickly. New positioning. Reuters reported that after the May 14th summit, Xi praised what he called a new positioning in U.S. China ties. On paper, it sounded calm. Cooperation, measured competition, strategic stability, a constructive relationship over the next 3 years and beyond. That sounds reasonable, even reassuring. But diplomatic language is not decoration. It is architecture. It defines what is allowed, what is expected, and what gets invoked the next time there is a disagreement. So let me translate new positioning into plain English. China wants to be treated as a co-author of the rules, not a country adapting to an American-defined order, not a rising power working inside a framework written in Washington. A co-author. And that matters because frameworks are more powerful than they sound. A deal settles one issue. A framework decides how future issues will be judged. If Washington sanctions a Chinese company for buying Iranian oil, Beijing can say that violates cooperation. If the United States sells advanced weapons to Taiwan, Beijing can say that violates strategic stability. If America restricts technology flows to China, Beijing can answer with win-win cooperation. These phrases may sound soft, but they create limits on what America can do alone. That is why this summit matters. Xi did not just ask for a better relationship. He asked for a new framework. And frameworks are how rules get rewritten. The important part is that this new positioning language came at the same summit as the Taiwan warning. That is not a coincidence. It is the message. We will cooperate, but on these terms. We will stabilize the relationship, but within these limits. And once America accepts China as a co-author of the rules, the old order has already begun to change. Now look at where those new rules become real. Taiwan. This was the most important moment of the summit. Not the trade discussion, not the energy proposals, not the ceremonial warmth. The warning. According to AP reporting, Xi told Trump directly that mishandling Taiwan could lead to serious conflict between the United States and China. Reuters reported the same basic message. Mishandling Taiwan could push the relationship into a dangerous situation. That is not normal summit language. At the highest level, at the summit table, the leader of China used the possibility of conflict to describe what could happen if Washington crosses Beijing's red line. Now, I want to be careful. I am not saying Trump gave up Taiwan. I am not saying there was a secret deal. The facts do not support that. What the facts do support is this. Xi used the summit table to deliver a warning on the most dangerous issue in the relationship. And Trump's public response, according to AP, was warm language. He called Xi a great leader. He called him a friend. He expressed optimism. That contrast is the story. A warning from Xi, warm words from Trump, and Taiwan sitting in the middle. So why does Taiwan matter so much? Because Taiwan is not just a distant island. It is three things at once. First, it is a security issue. Taiwan sits at the center of the first island chain, the geography that shapes military power in Asia. Japan watches Taiwan. The Philippines watches Taiwan. South Korea watches Taiwan. Australia watches Taiwan, because every one of them is asking the same question. If America bends under Chinese pressure here, what does that mean for us? Second, Taiwan is a technology issue. Taiwan is central to advanced semiconductor manufacturing. The chips behind artificial intelligence, advanced weapons, smartphones, data centers, and the future of American technology run through that island. AP reported that U.S. plans to sell around $11 billion in weapons to Taiwan were part of the backdrop to this summit. That number tells you two things. Washington takes Taiwan seriously, and Beijing wanted to send a warning before those lines harden. Third, Taiwan is a credibility issue, and this may be the most important part. A signal of American uncertainty on Taiwan does not stay in the Taiwan Strait. It travels to Tokyo, to Manila, to Seoul, to Canberra. Every ally reads it. Every rival reads it. Every market reads it. Because Taiwan is not just about Taiwan. It is about whether America still holds its red lines. And if Taiwan becomes the price of stability, if the cost of a smoother relationship with Beijing is a softer American posture on Taiwan, then this summit is no longer about diplomacy. It is about America's credibility. Let me make this immediate. Taiwan may sound distant. Diplomatic frameworks may sound abstract. Leverage may sound like something only analysts talk about. But this summit was not distant. It was about American farms, American energy, American cars, American technology. And the prices people feel at home. Start with beef. Reuters reported that during the summit, China renewed and then halted licenses for hundreds of U.S. beef export facilities. More than 400 American facilities were affected. That was about 65% of the plants that had once been eligible to export beef to China. Think about that. 65% renewed, then halted during the summit. That was not just paperwork. That was a signal. Beijing opened the door, showed Washington what cooperation could look like, and then closed the door again. For American ranchers, farmers, meat packers, and exporters, this was not abstract diplomacy. And access to that market can rise or fall depending on the temperature of the U.S. China relationship. U.S. beef exports to China peaked at around $1.7 billion in 2022. By last year, according to Reuters, that figure had fallen to around $500 million. That is not just a market fluctuation. That is leverage. Now, energy. Reuters reported that a potential Trump-Xi deal could revive U.S. oil and LNG exports to China, trade worth about $8.4 billion in 2024, before trade war tariffs effectively halted most of those flows. That means American energy production, American export jobs, American trade revenue, all tied to what happens at the negotiating table in Beijing. Now, rare earths. These are the materials behind electric vehicles, fighter jets, guided missiles, MRI machines, smartphone screens, and modern defense systems. China does not just produce many of them, it dominates the processing. And processing is the part that matters. Because raw material is not enough. You need the refining capacity that turns it into something factories can actually use. The United States cannot simply mine its way out of that dependency overnight. Now, chips and artificial intelligence. This is not just about who makes better apps. It is about who leads the industries of the next 30 years. Data centers, defense systems, advanced manufacturing, the companies that will define the next economy. And now oil. Around the time of the summit, gasoline was roughly $4.49 per gallon. Oil was above $100 per barrel. And the crisis around Iran and the Strait of Hormuz connected directly to Beijing, because China is the largest buyer of Iranian oil. That gives Beijing a channel to Tehran that Washington cannot simply replace. So look at the pattern. Beef, energy, rare earths, chips, oil. They look like separate issues. They are not. They are leverage points. And Xi can use them to signal goodwill, create pressure, or extract concessions. That is what made the beef licenses so important. They were a live demonstration. Open the door, close the door. Show America what cooperation can look like. Then remind America who controls the switch. This summit is not just about diplomacy. It is about the gas in your tank, the chip in your phone, the price of your car, the jobs in American energy, and whether the United States still controls the supply chains it depends on. And that is the uncomfortable part, because if every issue on the table gives Xi something to bargain with, then what exactly does Trump have to give up to get a win? Now we have to talk about Trump, not as a personality story, as a strategic question. Because Trump's entire political identity is built around one claim. I am the deal maker. I walk into the room with leverage. I apply pressure. I extract better terms. I get the deal other politicians were too weak to get. That brand has worked politically. It worked because it spoke to something many Americans already believed. That the United States had been taken advantage of. That allies were not paying enough. That trade deals were too soft, that Washington had forgotten how to use American power. But that brand depends on one condition. The other side has to need the deal more than you do. And that is the problem with Xi. Xi is not a weak counterparty. China has the world's second largest economy. It has supply chain leverage. It has rare earths. It has market access. It has influence with countries Washington needs to manage. Iran, Russia, large parts of the global south. And Xi has one more advantage Trump does not have. Time. Trump needs visible wins. Xi can wait. That difference matters. AP described Trump's public tone at the summit as warm and conciliatory. He called Xi a great leader. He called him a friend. He expressed optimism. But according to AP, Xi used the same summit to warn about possible confrontation over Taiwan. And Reuters reported that Xi also pushed for a new positioning in U.S. China relations. Those are not symmetrical postures. One side was selling optimism, the other was setting conditions. Now, to be fair, Trump may still get real economic gains from this summit, Reuters reported that possible outcomes included tariff cuts on roughly $30 billion of imports, a farm and agricultural deal, possible progress on energy exports, and broader trade stabilization. Those things matter. Tariff relief is real. Farm access is real. Energy trade is real. But here is the distinction that matters most. A political win and a strategic win are not the same thing. A political win is something Trump can announce. A number, a deal, a handshake, a headline, something that looks like victory on television. A strategic win is different. It is something that improves America's position over time. It protects leverage. It protects red lines. It protects the ability to shape the rules later. And the risk is that Trump may get one while Xi gets the other. Trump may get the headline. Xi may get the framework. Trump may announce farm purchases. Xi may get acceptance of new positioning. Trump may get tariff relief. Xi may get softer pressure on technology, sanctions, or Taiwan. I am not saying that has already happened. I am saying this is the danger to watch, because structural shifts rarely arrive as one dramatic announcement. They happen through small accommodations. Each one sounds reasonable. Each one looks practical. Each one can be defended as a deal. But together, they change the rules. And that is the real test of this summit. Not whether Trump can make a deal, but whether he can make one without giving away the rules. The world rewards analytical patience. So let me give you 3 honest ways to read what happened in Beijing on May 14th, and let you decide which fits the evidence. Interpretation 1. Trump recognizes the world is changing and is adapting rationally. The old American-led order, the one built after 1945 and consolidated after 1991, is under genuine stress. The unipolar moment is over. China is a peer competitor, not a junior partner. In this reading, Trump's willingness to engage Xi directly, to pursue a managed trade framework, to seek cooperation on Iran and energy, reflects a clear-eyed understanding that the U.S. China relationship has to be managed rather than dictated. The warm language is not weakness. It is pragmatic statecraft in a world where direct confrontation with China carries enormous risk and enormous cost. This is a legitimate interpretation. It is held by serious people. Interpretation 2. Trump is turning the summit into a domestic political win, and the strategic consequences are secondary. Reuters reported Trump went to China in need of wins. The Iran war had hurt his approval ratings. Oil prices were elevated. The tariff war had produced costs on both sides without a clear resolution. In this reading, the summit is primarily a domestic performance, a chance to announce deals, take credit for stability, and present himself as the deal-maker who sat down with Xi and produced results. Whether those results actually protect American strategic interests over the medium term is less urgent than whether they play well before the next election cycle. This is also a legitimate interpretation. Interpretation 3, Xi understands interpretation 2 and is planning around it. If Trump needs visible wins, Xi can provide them. He can offer agricultural purchases, energy trade commitments, tariff discussions, and the warm language of a constructive relationship. He can open and close beef licenses as a demonstration of what cooperation looks like. And while Trump takes those wins home, Xi can simultaneously establish the new positioning framework, deliver the Taiwan warning, and advance the underlying strategic agenda of being recognized as a co-author of the rules. In this reading, Xi is not reacting to Trump. He is managing him, offering enough headline material to satisfy the political need, while advancing a structural agenda that will outlast this summit, and possibly this administration. The danger of interpretation 3 is not that it is conspiratorial. It is that it is structurally plausible. It does not require Xi to be a genius or Trump to be naive. It only requires that both men are pursuing their interests, and that their interests in this specific moment are not aligned. Maybe Trump is recognizing that the old order is breaking. Maybe he is trying to turn that break into a deal. Or maybe she understands something even more dangerous. Trump needs a win, and wins have a price. Maybe Trump is playing a new game, or maybe she already knows the game better. Let me come back to the phrase at the center of Trump's political project: Make America Great Again. I am not going to mock it. I am not going to defend it. I am going to take it seriously as an analytical question, because I think it is actually the most important lens through which to understand what the Beijing summit reveals. What does it mean for America to be great in 2026? For most of the post-war era, the answer was comprehensive: military dominance, dollar dominance, technological leadership, the ability to set the rules of international trade, finance, security architecture, and technology standards, and to enforce those rules through a combination of economic power, military presence, and alliance credibility. America did not just play the game, it helped write the rulebook. It defined what the game was. That capacity, rule setting, is not the same as military power. It is not the same as economic size. It is a specific kind of authority that flows from being the country that others coordinate around, that others adapt to, that others expect to set the standard. That authority is being tested, not destroyed, tested. And the test is not primarily military. China is not trying to defeat America on a battlefield. It is trying to establish that the United States can no longer set the rules alone, that Beijing's consent, cooperation, and framework participation are now required for the system to function. That is what new positioning means. That is what the Taiwan warning signals. That is what the beef license opening and closing demonstrated. These are not random actions. They are a coherent message. China is a rule maker now. Deal with it. American greatness is not only about what the country can do militarily or economically in isolation. It is about whether America can still shape the system, whether its preferences, its values, its security commitments, and its economic relationships still carry the weight needed to determine how the global order is organized. If she can push Washington toward a framework where China helps write the terms, where Taiwan's security is negotiated rather than guaranteed, where technology export controls are bargaining chips rather than strategic tools, where sanctions are moderated by the need for Chinese cooperation, then something has shifted. Not collapsed, shifted. America did not stop being powerful. It may be discovering that power is not the same as leverage, and that leverage, the specific ability to shape outcomes in specific situations, is increasingly contested. The summit lasted 2 hours. She warned about Taiwan. She praised a new framework. Trump spoke warmly. No major immediate concrete agreements were announced, and the next morning, the world continued as before. That is how structural shifts happen. Not with a bang, with a framework, with a phrase like new positioning that sounds diplomatic until you translate it, with a warning about Taiwan that lands quietly but travels far, with a beef license opened and closed during a summit to remind an agricultural superpower that market access is not guaranteed. With 2 hours in a room, at a table, between two men whose countries are the central actors in the defining question of the next 30 years. Who writes the rules? Trump came to Beijing to show America is still great. She came to show America no longer writes the rules alone. Whether Trump got a deal that actually protects American strength, or a headline that papers over a structural shift, is not a question I can answer today. The evidence for that verdict will emerge over months and years, in the policies that follow, in the commitments that are kept or walked back, in the behavior of American allies who are reading these signals carefully. The question of whether America can still be great, in the full sense of that word, the sense that includes writing the rules, is no longer purely a question of American will or American capability. It is now also a question of whether America can maintain the leverage needed to shape a world that China is actively trying to help define. That is not a comfortable question for a country that has spent 70 years assuming the answer is obvious. It is, however, the right question, and it was sitting in the room in Beijing on May 14th, whether or not either man named it. So, here is what I want to leave you with. Not a verdict, a question. If Xi is trying to write the new rules, if new positioning is not diplomatic pleasantry, but a genuine framework shift, if the Taiwan warning is not theater, but a structural red line, if the beef license opening and closing is not a coincidence, but a demonstration, can Trump stop him? And if the answer is that stopping Xi requires American leverage that may be more limited than the brand suggests, what does that mean for the promise that brought Trump to the White House? Can America be made great again in a world where China helps define what greatness costs? I genuinely do not know the answer. Anyone who tells you they do is selling something. But I know the question matters. And I know that the 2 hours in Beijing on May 14th, 2026 were not an ordinary summit. Leave me your answer below, because this is the conversation America needs to have, not the one being had on cable news, but the real one, about leverage and rules, and what it means to lead a world that is no longer waiting for American permission to change.